Welcome, everybody, to the 1867 Sports Show. We are on episode number Jimmy Fox tonight. And you might be wondering, why am I mentioning Jimmy Fox? And why am I wearing Sudbury Wolves hat, sweater, just, showing love for my hometown? Well, we have a very special guest joining us tonight, none other than the great Ken MacKenzie, Sudbury Wolves hockey legend. Let's get a golf clap for Ken joining the 1867 show tonight. Ken, what's going on, my friend?
Oh, thanks, Kyle. Not a lot, buddy. Just kind of enjoying the summer right now and sitting back a little bit. And yeah, before you know, it'll be another fall will be here, and it's another hockey season starting up.
There you go. There you go. And I'd be remiss, obviously, if I didn't mention my fantastic co-host, Mr. Kyle Skinner. Kyle, what's up, man?
Yeah, you make it seem as though the Sudbury Wolves gear is few and far between on these episodes for you. You are constantly rocking that and doing your hometown proud, for sure.
When you're proud of where you come from, you just got to make sure that you're putting it out there for the world to see. And that's something, obviously, it's very near and dear to my heart. And again, the Sudbury Wolves were a very big part of my upbringing. So always love to show some love to the home team whenever I can. But again, we've got living legend Ken MacKenzie with us tonight. And for those of you who aren't aware of Ken's career, he's been involved with the Sudbury Wolves for 30 plus years in multiple capacities, from assistant coach to head coach to assistant general manager. I'm pretty sure, do you also mop the floors around the building too when you're there? Or
Yeah, one time or another I have, buddy. Yeah, it's all been part of my job. Loving every bit of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, we talk a lot of junior hockey on this show, and obviously this is strictly focused on the Canadian aspect of things. And the Sudbury Wolves are kind of a staple in the junior hockey community. I think you can talk to people from across the country. They know who the Sudbury Wolves are. They know the rich history behind it. And obviously you're a very big part of that. So maybe this kind of, started off with, how did you get involved with the Sudbury Wolves way back in the day, and kind of where it's taking you now?
Well, it started. I was coaching Tier 2 here in Sudbury. I was actually coaching Onapee Falls for quite a few years. Um, Thinking of retiring a little bit from the game, and then just sitting back. But a man named Ken Burgess, he bought the Sudbury Wolves. Sudbury was struggling at the time to get fans in the building. They couldn't win a game. I think they might have been the worst team in the Canadian Hockey League for 3 or 4 years. So here comes a man. He says, "I'm buying a hockey team," and it was. And he just purchased the Nickel Center Suns Tier 2 hockey team. First year, he's never been involved in hockey. I just left Onapee Falls. He approached me, said, "Come on, 1 year." He said, "You just got to coach my team. We're going out to Nickel Center." I said, "No, I can't do it." I just didn't have it and didn't want to do it. Such a great man, such a nice person. Couldn't say no, the usual. So I said, "Okay, I'll give it 1 year with you." So we took on that one. We went out to Nickel Center. We put a team together. It's kind of like the Bad News Bears to start off with. We took our licks at the start, but hey, we had a real successful year. We ended up winning the league. Actually, for the first time ever, team from the north, we ended up beating the south, and that was the time when he was, it's January, February, when he purchased the Sudbury Wolves. And yeah, after that season, it was, "Hey, you're coming on up with us." They'd hired a coach. He said, "But you got to be there with us." And first year, yeah, things didn't work out well for the coach. And yeah, so I took over, and that's where it all started. It was Ken Burgess that really got me into the game with the Sudbury Wolves.
I'm just going to say, they didn't really let you have a lot of time to get your feet wet with the junior game, because you kind of got thrust into the fire about halfway through the season.
No, and it was one of those years like, who would want the team? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not a lot of success, but you know what? That was the fun part about it. We back in early on when I dabbled playing with the Wolves a little bit back in the Ron Duguay and Randy Carlisle days. That's when that place, that it was rocking. You know what I mean? And kind of lost a little mojo for a little while, and it was nice to get them. By the time my tender end of there as his coach, it was, we're packing the building again. You're lined up outside Elgin Street trying to get tickets to the games, and so that transition was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, you've obviously mentioned some absolute legendary players of Ron Duguay. And that's kind of where I wanted to go with this, because when you inherited the team, you mentioned that they were kind of at the bottom, working their way back up. And kind of when I started to watch you guys and follow was obviously family related, because you brought on my Uncle Rick to be one of your assistant coaches. And I can't stress enough like how fun those times were to come and watch you guys play, because you guys had such a great roster. And I'm just going to rattle off a few names from that 90-91 team. And I'm sure you remember them like it was yesterday. But these are just not only predominant players in the Sudbury game, but when you look at the overall scope of the hockey landscape, these are legends when it comes to games played, NHL stars and whatnot. So Glenn Murray, my favorite player growing up, Jamie Matthews, Sean Rivers, Adam Bennett, Brandon Convery, Mike Pekka, Sean O'Donnell, Mike Yeo, Derek Armstrong.
Wow, those are getting back to no good. But I want to mention before we go any further, you did have. I was very fortunate to have Rick with me, my first year's coaching. What a great addition to our staff. I had him and my brother with us, and it was together. We kind of built that, from the ground up, and it was great having them there. But all those names you've mentioned, it seems like so many years ago, but it's funny, Kyle, how it goes, because as of today, even during the year, Sean O'Donnell's working with the San Jose Sharks, right? Like we have one of their drafted players. So, we stay in touch. He's a player personnel guy. I'm sorry, with LA, him and Glenn Murray, two guys that played together with us. They're still working together. One's your boss, one's the other guy. But I mean, so we've had some, great times to catch up again. And that's been great. You stay in touch with those guys. Mike Yeo, yourself. Very fortunate, with my son coaching in Nashville now. We've met up on the road a couple times at games. And so those names from the past, Mike Pekka with the Rangers now, one of my all-time favorites, like probably the smallest guy I think we've ever drafted, the hardest hitting guy. But stay in touch with him. All those names you're mentioning. The only one you didn't mention out there that, what a beauty he was at the time, our captain, Paul DiPietro. Another guy out there that I stay in touch with. He's been in Switzerland for so many years, but
yeah,
wow, those guys, they are legends of the game. Like you said, they played over 1,000 games in the NHL, and just staying in touch with those guys and reminiscing. They love talking about the old days too in Sudbury.
Yeah, no, and I mean the fact that they were all on one team speaks volumes to your eye for talent and bringing them all aboard, right? But before I turn it over to Kyle, I just want to maybe just throw out something here. So I'm sure that my Uncle Rick was the calm guy in your coaching staff, right? Always has a level head, never loses his temper at all. He's the guy who kind of calms everything down in the locker room.
Oh yeah, you got the Kirkwood. You know what that's like, right? Hey, nobody stepped out of line though with Rick around, so that was good. We keep everybody in line. Great to have around.
Yeah. When we can share some stories on a more of a PG-13 episode later on with my Uncle Rick. He's kind of a legend in his own right. But go ahead.
He was, man.
Yeah, no, and it's so funny when you look at it kind of down the road here. Now these are all grown men. Obviously, you guys were working with them when they were teenagers here, and so now that you've got kind of that hindsight is 2020, and you look back on kind of what their personalities were like when they were first entering, the OHL to where they are now, like. Who's maybe a name, and it doesn't necessarily even need to be any that we've rattled off yet. It could be someone else from another team there, but who is maybe a name that surprised you in where they ended up in their actual career, whether it's in the pros or front office or whatever, not because, that they were a bust or they fizzled out or anything like that, but just because this was clearly someone who maybe matured a little bit later on and, how they were in Sudbury, maybe they pieced things together a little bit after some of the other guys, but who was maybe a pleasant surprise as to how far they actually went in the world of hockey in your eyes there?
I would never want him to hear this and take it the wrong way, but he is one of your Ottawa guys. It would be Sean O'Donnell. I mean, wow. I mean, when we coached him and we had him for his 4 years in Sudbury, and Kyle mentioned the other name was Adam Bennett, but Adam Bennett was a first round pick to the NHL. injuries kind of kept him out and that, but he was always a high-end guy, scored goals for you. He could do everything. And Sean O'Donnell just went about everything quietly. Like, I mean, he started off, he may have had the worst shot in the league, and he wasn't that, but I'll tell you, that guy, he was always my favorite, man. But back then, he was a tough guy too. You know what I mean? Like, nobody messed with him. He looked after his teammates. Just a great guy to have around the dressing room, and to watch him, and then to see him develop, and then to play in the National Hockey League. And I said, wow, like that one there, that was a surprise. And I still remember bringing my son down to Boston, and my son was probably 8 or 9 at the time. But um, to meet Sean O'Donnell and Glenn Murray, we went out for dinner after Boston and played against my son with Florida. And to see those guys, you're just so happy for them, so proud for them. He came from, like I said, from Ottawa, just a great person, and his family was outstanding. Got to meet the mom and the dad, and yeah, so I was real happy for Sean. It's great story, and we're still in touch. So love the guy.
Yeah. And I think everyone who's always been a fan of the Sudbury Wolves and followed them over the course of their tenure, I think Sean's one of the guys who would be on the Mount Rushmore of Sudbury Wolves players at the end of it, right? Because he was such a loved guy in the community. He was a great guy in the locker room, and like you're saying, he just brought everything that he had at the time, and then kept developing and developing and developing, which is kind of indicative of what you want out of a Northern Ontario hockey player, right? It's just blood and guts.
100%.
Yeah, blood and guts guy.
100%.
Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit, because obviously you've talked about some other people that you've been able to work with and kind of be around. We're going to fast forward to your next tenure as an assistant coach, and I'm going to rattle off some names on this team because, again, very, very high profile players, and maybe a couple that very, very well here. So again, talking about a fantastic player: Norm Milley, Mike Fisher, Taylor Pyatt, Jason Jaspers, Mr. Skinner's one of his all-time favorites, Ottawa Senator Brian McGrattan. We've got Andrew Raycroft in net, and let's finish it off with none other than your pride and joy, Mr. Derek MacKenzie. So again, one roster that's housing all of these future NHL stars, coaches, etc. But again, a little different spin, because now your son is being, thrust into the spotlight of being one of these prominent players. What was that like, kind of, seeing Derek grow up in that environment, kind of being around the club, being around the team a little bit earlier on in his hockey career, and then eventually taking the next step as to actually being a member of the hockey team, and ultimately being very, very successful and being one of the best players of his time?
Well, again, that group there, when you said housing them, that's pretty much what I did. Those guys, they seemed to be living at my house while I played for the Wolves. It was always Fisher at the house. It was always Raycroft. Those three guys, you couldn't split them up, and the Payets. They were just, what a great group. And like I said, and for you guys in Ottawa, the Norm Milley, coaching with the Ottawa 67 now, that's just one of the classiest people I've ever been involved with, and they're so fortunate to have him in their system right now coaching, because he's so good with the kids. But when you go back to those players, um and now again, you're reflecting back to these days, but it's like when you go to Nashville now, and to go down there, and Mike Fisher comes over to the house, and it's those connections that these guys keep together. And I've been so fortunate to be part of that little run with Derek and all his buddies. So it's been great. And like you said, those guys, the Taylor Payets, Andrew Raycroft, like I said, these guys were so much fun. They were in their teen years. They were going to St. Charles together, and they were living up. They were having fun. I mean, you got to remember that those years. I think that's why I like junior hockey as much as I did, and been involved in it so long. It's those are the years that you're going to remember the rest of your life. And I mean, these kids are coming here, and it's for hockey. We know that, we get it, and get their schooling, but these are going to be the memories that these guys bring. And I know Sudbury sometimes has always been a tough sell for people that have never been here. But when you say that, a lot of these guys that have played their junior hockey careers here, they've come back, and they've married girls from Sudbury. They love Sudbury. They just keep wanting to come back. Sudbury's a great city. And like I said, we got a great fan base. Just they're so passionate, these fans. and to have those guys all come through the group and then come back and still meet up with these guys occasionally. It's like I said, it's just the names you've mentioned. Obviously, you did your homework, you followed us, because those are all the names that I stay connected with. And like I said, just great for that. And then for Derek to be part of that, and you know what, he just quietly just snuck in with these guys. He was part of the crew and he found his way. So it was good. And he did it on his own, which was nice. So really enjoyed that second time around being assistant associate coach with the Wolves. And yeah, some real exciting hockey back then too.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, it was so fun from our perspective watching it, because one, you grew up watching all these great players, and then, you know, like junior hockey goes, you have a little bit of a lull and then kind of builds back up over time. But then you see these special teams get put together, you know, just like for these 1 or 2 year runs. And like you're mentioning, the camaraderie that you see from these guys off the ice, just, you know, it resonates on the ice. And this is why you see a lot of these junior programs excel. And I'll throw out another Sudbury, you know, famous Sudbury Wolf, who's running a pretty good program in his own right, Dale Hunter, you know, with what he's been able to do down in London. I mean, I think a lot of the lessons that he took from, you know, that, you know, working class community in Sudbury, and really taking that to his NHL career with, you know, bringing your lunch bucket to work every day, now kind of bringing it with his brothers and his family to run the London Knights. Again, I think you can kind of see a little bit thrown in there. Maybe I'm just being a little bit wishy-washy, just kind of, you know, flattering the flattering the hometown. But like you're saying, Kenny, I mean, there's some communities that just, they embody their hockey team. They embody, you know, whatever sport franchise that, you know, that they have. I think Sudbury is one of the best ones that we can probably, you know, use for that definition in Canada, because really there's nothing else like it in Sudbury when the Wolves are on an absolute heater, right?
You're right. You're so right with that. It's just, and like I said, we've seen a bit of that this year here. We had, it was another fun year for us, but you know, to get back to the Hunters, and yeah, I mean, what an honor and privilege to be able to play for that man. He's done such a great job. He's been, and Mark, you know, the two of them, the family together. What a great job they've done in London. And I mean, really, that's the hub of hockey right now. These guys just keep producing winter after winter, and hey, that comes. I mean, that's Dale. That's him bringing. You know, he coaches the way he plays. I mean, that's he plays with his heart. He plays with passion. He's got so many stories that he can always relate to with these guys, and I'm happy for him. You know, he said, like I said, he knew what it was like. He left home at an early age to come to Sudbury, but you know, when he comes back to Sudbury, he likes to reminisce. He likes to go to the places he used to go when he was here, and yeah, real happy for him. And like I said, so you've gotten through almost 2, 3 generations of different types of players, but it's like I said, and one of the guys back at the time, and we missed his name a little bit, and I stay in touch with him too, was Rod Shutt. You know,
Yep.
big times goal scorer. I think he would have maybe 72 one here or something, but you know, he found his way back to Sudbury, married a girl here, had a business, and he still comes out to support the Sudbury Wolves. And great having those guys around. They're just, like I said, it's they're great memories, and I love when they come around the rink to see us and talk hockey.
Yeah. And, you know, as Kyle was laying out there for everyone listening as well, too, right? You've worn so many hats with this organization, from head coach to assistant, associate coach. You're coaching your own son. You're in the front office. Like, of all of those, which one was not necessarily the most challenging, but which one had the steepest learning curve in season for you there to try to kind of adapt to out of all those roles that you ended up going through?
Well, I would have to say early on, I mean, hockey's changed so much. I mean, when I took over, like I said, it was, you know, it was Kyle's on. Rick came along board with me, and I brought my brother along board. Didn't have a lot of coaching experience to start off, so we were really in it on our own. And I would say for me, you know, those days are where I really learned how to coach. I had to, you know, dig in a little bit, and I was very fortunate to work with Sam McMaster. I'm sure you guys have all heard of Sam McMaster.
Mhm.
When he came to Sudbury, he really opened a lot of doors for me. And it's funny because one of the guys that I'll never forget was Terry Crisp. You know, that was one of the guys that Sam introduced me to, and he says, "You're going to spend, you know, this summer you're going to cottage. You're going to spend some time to him." yeah, you're going to pick his brain. You're going to be with him. And, from there, then I got to go to the Washington Capitals training camp a couple years and work with the Poils. And Sam did a lot for me. I mean, life's about experience. And there's one thing I learned in life. I said, you're never good enough. You got to keep getting better if you want to stick at the game. And I was always willing. Anybody that wanted to help out, and I was always a listener. And that's where the tough part of the game is. And then once you get that lifetime experience under your belt, you're not second guessing yourself as many times. I mean, you always have to make big decisions. You're going to make some good ones. You're going to make some bad ones. But I just think the longer you're in the game, you feel more comfortable with your decisions that you make, and you run with them. And like I said, so those first years, 2, 3, 4, those were tough years. Those were years, but wow, you learn in a hurry, and you have to, because you're under fire, you're under gun all the time. You know what coaching is like. But I'll always go back to those roots, just starting off, and how you got to where you were. So I really enjoyed those years, and I'm very thankful to, like I said, Sam McMaster, and helping out, with the coaching part of it, bringing me out to meet people that were at a higher level.
Yeah. We're talking about your role, coach, talking about your role in the front office. What's more stressful in your mind, going into round 1 of the OHL playoffs against the number 1 rated team, or watching your son play in the World Juniors?
That's a tough one. You got to go from coach to fan. And it was, I know when he played in the World Juniors, I'll never forget that experience either. He played over in Russia. He went over to Moscow, and that was my first time ever being there. And yeah, it was different. I can tell you that. Nothing against Russia, but I did go there once, and I said, you know what? I'm never going back to that place. I ended up going back 2 more times with the Wolves to play in the tournament. But I think it's hard. I mean, two different things, man. You're coaching one, and you're so involved, and then the other ones, it's kind of pins and needles. You're not making those decisions, but you want everything to work out for your son and for the team, and both very enjoyable. Like I said, I'll never forget either of the experience. This whole journey through the Hockey Canada program. I think that's what really started for me. Was the U16, well, the U17 now, and then U18. We went over to Europe with them, and then to the World Juniors in Moscow. So that was fun. And the one thing is, you might be a coach all the time, and you're being a dad, but wherever I went, wherever I followed him, I was learning. I was watching the games. I never missed practices. I wanted to keep learning. So you're learning a different part of the game all the time. And I was very fortunate that way to be part of all that all the way through.
Yeah. No, it's I remember before you left, you came over to our house. You were watching one of the preliminary games before you headed out to Moscow to go watch the rest of it, and I could just see you on the chair in the back. I think your handprints are still on my dad's love seat.
No, that was they were. I'll tell you, that was. I think the hardest part of that whole procedure, making Team Canada, is, they put this team together, and now like, it comes down to the night. Everybody, they don't tell you. You go to bed at night, and you wake up in the morning, you made it, you didn't make it. So trust me, not too many people went to bed and got any sleep that night. And then once he made the team, and that's when it was at your place. I said, okay, let's get that ticket. I'm out of here. We're going to Moscow. So very proud to put on a Canadian jersey like that and to be part of it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
And as you're going through that process, obviously you've lived it yourself, having your son go through it, and then you've now seen it from your current role with the Wolves as well too, of what that process kind of looks like as Hockey Canada is trying to identify these players and whatnot. Has there been a major shift in kind of what that procedure is like from when Derek was going through it versus what it is now, or by and large, is it pretty similar to what it was back when he was coming up through the ranks and actually competing over in Moscow?
It would be pretty much the same. There's not a lot of differences. It's just these kids today. It's tough to be a kid today growing up, and I think one of the things that hurt a lot of people. We don't want to get into any of those stories, but the social media part of everything for these guys, not realizing. I mean, our biggest speeches to these kids, even the Wolves, like every day, every week, like, stay off your phone, stay off the social media, boys. not a lot of good's going to happen for them. So they can't really make a lot of mistakes anymore. You know what I mean? And they are kids. They're in their, 17, 18, 19. They're trying to have fun. They're trying to live their lives. But I mean, anything you say, anything you do now, it's caught on camera, and it's
Yeah.
posted, and it's tough. It's tough to be those kids today. And for them, in saying that, you got to keep clean nose. But these kids, they're so professional now, most of these kids, the way they're coming up, and they know what's at stake for them. So, but it's a tough process. It really is. And to get kids to go there, I know we've had a few, Wolves players there, but there's so many good players out there today. It's a tough program to get involved. And I think if you can get your roots into it, and if you look at it over the years, if you can start off with that U17 program and do yourself well there, and they're successful, they don't make a lot of changes as they go to the 18 and the under, World
Yeah.
Juniors. So getting into it early is a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that a lot now with the U.S. developmental program as well, right? Like once you're in when you're 10, 11 years old, they kind of, guide you through and coach you with the same group all the way up. And that's why you're seeing the U.S. be more competitive whenever it comes to these junior tournaments than they ever were before. So it's kind of good in one sense because you've got a group of players playing all together for a long period of time. But like you're saying, it also doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room for any of these, late bloomers who might be,
It
wanting
doesn't.
to crack that lineup.
It does. And kind of like you said, you look at the NHL drafts today, that US program that they put together, I mean, look at the draft picks that come out of there, but it's the high end guys that are sticking together, and yeah, they develop together, and it's been very successful for them. So good for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe just a couple more things, Ken, before we let you go. I know we're taking you away from your cottage time, so we don't want to.
No, it's all good, buddy. It's
don't
all
want to
good.
take too much of that. But for me, obviously, I've mentioned a lot of players. I've mentioned a lot of different generations and iterations of the Sudbury Wolves, hockey franchise. For you being involved with so many of these big moments, what's maybe the one, I don't want to say proudest, but what's the one moment that kind of sticks out in your head that you could say, you know what, that's really the one story when all these old guys are coming back and talking about the old days and whatnot. What's your one go-to story that says, you know what, I was a part of that, I'm proud of it, and here's why?
Man, like you said, there's a lot of them. There's so many of them. I would have to think Kyle, one of them for sure, because everybody in Sudbury still talks about it. You're going to remember we go way back to the Paul DiPietro days, and I'll never forget it. We were up, three games to nothing against Owen Sound, and they came back and made it 3-1, 3-2, 3-3. But we had game 7 at home at Sudbury Arena. The place was jammed. It was sold out. We totally dominated the score. I mean, the shot clock was 40 shots to maybe 12 or whatever, and then we scored it overtime to win it. And the place went nuts and rocking. And I'll never forget the official. I'm not going to mention his name, but then he goes back and says no goal. He called the goal back. There's no replay or nothing. Paulie had everybody celebrating. The place is going nuts. They come back, and on their first shot on net, they scored. And then they beat us in game 7. So that one's never going to go away. But then you know what? That's what the hockey's like. And then the following year, wow, we're down 3 games to nothing to Eric Lindros and the Oshawa Generals, and looks like you're going down 4 straight. And then we go on the road into Oshawa for game 4. Glenn Murray scores you the hat trick and get you back into the series. You win game, now game 5, game 6, come home for game 7. And another one of my all-time favorites. We're still very close. Terry Chitteroni, and his son's playing for the Wolves this year right now. He scores a game winner in game 7 in overtime. So we're up 3-0 in the series and lost in overtime. We came back the following year. You win in game 7 and in overtime. So yeah, some great memories there.
Yeah.
And you've got a lot of we'll call them armchair GMs for lack of a better word out there who, they'll watch maybe 8 to 10 games of a player and they kind of figure like, I know everything I need to know about so-and-so as a prospect here. But for someone who's working with these kids, not only on the ice, but off the ice, film study in the community, you're seeing what they're doing, when they're just invading your living room with all their friends and whatnot. Like, so you're getting a very holistic approach to the kids who not only make it, but also the kids who never play a game beyond when their OHL career kind of ends there. If you're to give kind of like one common denominator, one piece of advice to a hockey player out there who's listening right now, who's like, you know what? I want to put myself in the best possible position to succeed. Like, of all the guys that you have been involved with that have gone on to play professionally or NCAA or make it to the NHL, like, what's kind of been that one thing that linked them, whether it was in their training, whether it was in their preparation for the game? What kind of separated them from the guys who maybe didn't go on to play at that next level there?
I've had one word for me always that I live by, and it's compete. I mean, you've got to be that guy that's relentless. I mean, you compete and practice. You can tell a guy he's in the gym working out. He's on the ice. He's playing his teammates hard. He's making everybody in that room better. And you guys have a good one from Ottawa right now, playing with the Wolves. Just got drafted to Seattle. Nathan Villeneuve. I mean, he's one of those players. I'm just telling you, he's going to make it. He makes everybody around him better, and he's just a hard kid to play against. He lives in the gym. That's what you're looking in a player. I mean, we've also had like a lot of players from Ottawa area. David Goyette, last year, second round of Seattle, won the scoring race this year. But it's that compete. You have to have that passion for the game. And the other guys might want to go out. You're sitting there and you want video. You want to go over everything. And these kids today, it's such. When I say there's such a difference in the game, if you look even at the coaching now, you've got a goalie coach for the goalies. You've got a defensive guy. You've got a skills coach. So they're giving everything out there, every opportunity, to make it. But it's that compete. You just have to want it more than the guy beside you, and that's what's going to get you there. And
Yeah.
like I said, I'm not saying I know a lot about hockey, but I've seen enough kids come through, and you can pick them out at an early age. These kids, I want it, man. They're not going to say no to anybody. No's not part of the vocabulary. And like I said, even with our scouts, the whole way we threw, I mean, I don't care if you're big, you're small, you're this fast. I want guys that can compete. And I think that says the same in every sport. If you can
Yeah.
find that competitiveness, take that out of these guys, you're going to give them every opportunity in life to do what they want to do. So compete's the word for me.
100%. I think that's a word that resonates in any walk of life, because when you stop putting on the pads, you stop putting on the skates, and you go into the professional world, compete is literally what you have to do for the rest of your life, right?
100%.
And if you're not willing to do that when you're a kid, you won't have the skills necessary to excel at it when you're an adult. So 100%, I love that you're saying that, because that's a big thing that I think I use when I coach, and I know that Kyle uses when he coaches as well. So, I mean, that's any coach worth their weight. That literally should be the one thing that you teach is, how to compete.
You have to do it. And like I said, and you said it best. I mean, we talked about all these hockey players, all these great names from Sudbury, but you got to remember it's such a minority, such a low percentage of people that make it there. So during their journey, when they're coming through with you guys, you love each guy the same. You know what I mean? These guys are going to be somewhere someday. They're all good people, and it's our job to turn these young guys into young men, gentlemen. Now when they leave us, they're ready to go. They're going to school. They're going to be successful wherever they go. But for the guys that did make it, Kyle and I, like I said, I've got my grandkids. I got 4 of them coming up that all play at a high level hockey right now. They're young, but it's about compete for me. You know what? It's do your best now. And all I ever say, when you leave junior hockey, don't say I should have did it this way or I should have did it that way. Start off, give it your best. And at the end of the day, if you make it, great. And if you don't, say, hey, I did everything in my power to make it. And I tried and I wasn't good enough. So you can live with yourself. So
yeah,
I think that goes, like you said. I mean, I know you come from a very competitive family, Kyle. Everybody, I know you guys lifelong friends and always will be. But yeah, a lot of compete in that family. That's how you got to be. So
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your grandkids, and I'm sure Grandpa's got them competing, early and often. So that's good to hear that. But speaking of that, obviously we mentioned Derek a few times on the show, and he's doing very well for himself in his own coaching, pursuit. So I'm not going to say if, because I know this is going to be when Derek becomes an NHL head coach. He's going to call Dad and say, "Dad, I need you down here with me. Are you packing up and going down to help him, or is this you know what? I'll be a consultant on the side."
I'll be a consultant. You know what? Kyle, we've had such a relationship all the way through with his hockey journey. And like you said, we didn't get in his, but he was a great junior player. I really thought he
Yeah.
was, one of the best. But
Oh, he was.
and he stuck with the game. He stuck with the game. There's times when he said, "You know what, Dad?" Because he played. You got to remember, I don't know if you know this, Dad, but I think there's only two guys in hockey that ever played 1,000 professional games, that played the first 500 in the American League and then got 500 in the NHL. And he was one of them. And he stuck it out. But when you talk about the compete, there was, you know what I mean? That was him. That was just wow. And that's how he got to where he was today. And finally he made it. And he was a captain at every level he played at.
Yep.
And that's because of his passion and his compete. And like you said, someday he will be there. And you know what? Good for him. I mean, he's got a great crew right now. He's so fortunate to be working with a great coach in Andrew Burnett, and he had Joe Quinville, who helped him a lot. Hopefully someday he gets his own job. You know what? I'll be there at the grandkids. We'll be supporting him, but it'll be as a fan. It'll be as a fan, buddy.
No, I don't blame you. I mean, you've definitely carved out your niche, as a phenomenal junior hockey presence. I mean, I forgot to mention off the start, you have the highest winning percentage of any coach in Sudbury Wolf history. So that's something you can hang your hat on as well. So
yeah, very proud of that. And that's what I mean. It's coming from Sudbury. You want the best for the Sudbury Wolves. Come on, I mean they got a great team there right now with Daria Zulich owning the team, and they got Rob Papineau has been doing a great job bringing in players, and they got themselves a good young coach now coming in here in Barney. They're going to do well. It's a place you want to play right now, and that's what you want for Sudbury. Kyle, I mean, all I'm ever hoping for is we get a new arena, and it looks like that's in the makings right now. So good for the Sudbury fans. Maybe we'll get to see that, but yeah, they got a good thing going here in Sudbury. Very proud, like you are, being from Sudbury. So yeah, just happy to be part of that organization.
Yeah, well, Kenny, honestly, this has been so fantastic to not only reconnect but catch up with you a little bit and talk a little hockey and go down memory lane with the Sudbury Wolves, because like I said, some of my favorite memories growing up were being in the Sudbury Arena, watching you coaching, behind the bench with some of those fantastic players, and things that I'll remember for the rest of my life that I could share with my kids too. So, on behalf of Kyle and myself, again, thank you very much. And we really, really, wish the best for you. And hopefully we'll get Derek on here soon so we can get him in the hot seat.
You got her, buddy. Well, thanks so much for having me, and all the best to you guys. Doing a great job.
Quick golf clap for Ken sitting down with us, talking all things Sudbury Wolves, reminiscing a little bit there as well too. I mean, between Ken hopping on here, you and your gear, constantly dropping who works at the Sudbury tourism office that we can contact and just get some sponsorship dollars flowing in through here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make some calls, but yeah, no, that was honestly really fun for me, because it really brought me back to my childhood, going to Sudbury Wolves games and really kind of watching all those great names play. Because yeah, I mean, you forget, and I was just mentioning to you, like, we forget who plays for the junior hockey team in your respective city, right? And then when you go through the list, it's like, oh man, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
And
so
yeah,
which of the letters of Wolves, David Putty style, did you have painted on your chest as a kid there?
Well, I had to have the W, because all we do is win, baby.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, no, it's a good point too, right? As far as you forget some of these names who, whether it was, they played multiple years right up through their draft eligible year, or they had a cup of coffee in town, but it's like, oh yeah, he happened to play for the local junior club. But that was why when you texted me and said, all right, after our good friend Ken is done there, I want to run through some of the illustrious alumni of our two hometowns. So we're going to pit the Sudbury Wolves versus the Ottawa 67s in a all-time head-to-head lineup, goalie, 2D, 3 forwards. We're not gonna be sticklers about, oh, left wing, right wing, just 3 forwards and go from there.
Yeah. No, I thought about this one because, like I said, when we were kind of going through research for the show and again, just kind of going back to those days, I came across some names and I'm like, oh my God, like I have to talk more in depth about some of these guys because they just meant a lot, to me when I was young growing up. And obviously being in Ottawa and seeing how many, great players have come through the 67s franchise as well. Thought it'd be kind of a fun exercise. You haven't seen my list. I haven't seen your list. So yeah, let's see who can put together the best head-to-head lineup, and yeah, let's we'll debate as to who could take a 7-game series between these two.
Yeah. Well, why don't we go position by position here, and then we'll do some cross analysis, so to speak, there, of the two squads. So
Yeah.
why don't we start with goaltender? So
Okay.
I'll give you the honors of unveiling your first selection of Sudbury Wolves' all-time great netminder.
Yeah. So it came down to two. Two great goalies in the history of Sudbury Wolves. But, when you really look at the landscape of it, there weren't a lot to choose from. But again, two solid guys who I had to, come between. It was, a savvy veteran, maybe a little bit undersized, but had a very long NHL career. And you had a more recent guy who was a bigger body, kind of played more of the, stand-up style, made a couple of runs himself. But ultimately, I came down to, what? I think just in the landscape of it, I want to go with guy Don Beaupre as my starting goalie for the Sudbury Wolves.
So we're already tying Sudbury to Ottawa.
Yes,
vis-a-vis the professional ranks here. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Absolutely. And it came down to Donnie Beaupre and Mike Smith. Okay. So Mike Smith, good Kingston boy, came up to play for the Wolves and obviously just retired a couple of years ago. But yeah, it was kind of a duke out back and forth. And
the fact that he was also an Oilers goalie didn't tug at your heartstrings enough to get him the nod, eh?
No. And again, I'm trying to play, the non-biased version of this game. But yeah, Don Beaupre was a very good goalie for Sudbury. Led them to a few very big playoff wins, and in the history of Wolves goaltending, really kind of sticks out as kind of being one of the top guys, if not the top guy. So for me, I think we'll get Donnie Beaupre as the starter in net.
There you go. Good choice. Good choice there.
Thank you.
Where I ended up was someone who, very much like you were saying, you go through the list and you're like, they played for them? But in this one, it was before I was even born. So I get the hall pass on not knowing this. But for once I did find out, I knew exactly who I was going with. But there were some honorable mentions for sure. And, like you were saying, one of them current right now, Peter Mrazek. Obviously, yep. I have actual memories of him as a 67. Right?
Yes. And he had one of the... He had one of the best runs in regards to not only the playoffs in the OHL, but carried over to the World Juniors as well. Mm-hmm. Like his World Junior performance, when he was there, was phenomenal.
Well, I think that's where his draft stock went, like through the roof there when he was absolutely standing on his head at the World Juniors.
Yeah.
So Peter Mrazek didn't end up getting the nod there. Speaking of diminutive goaltenders, there, Mr. Darren Pang. Also former Ottawa 67 who
Hanger.
Again, maybe off air we'll share some of the stories because my dad, being a Nepean boy, he has some tales of Stevie Y and Panger just causing some chaos back in the day. But he also didn't get the nod. The one who did end up getting the selection that it was a today I learned moment was Michel Bunny Larocque was actually a Ottawa 67's goaltender, and he happened to go on and win 4 Vezinas and 4 Stanley Cups with the Montreal Canadiens alongside Ken Dryden. So he kind of did all right for himself there.
I mean, you say alongside Ken Dryden, but it was more of watching Ken Dryden win 4 Stanley Cups.
You dive into those stats and ask any Montrealer who was watching them back in the day. And yes, Ken Dryden was definitely the star, but Larocque, he was no slouch at all. And I think was a real reason why even during some of those spells where Dryden was dealing with some injuries and whether he even liked hockey, because Ken Dryden was a bit of an interesting cat. He had a lot of off ice ambitions as well too, and maybe that's a whole other episode we can get into. But I think he was a underrated star for those Montreal Canadiens squads there back in before my days in the 70s and whatnot.
Well, you've definitely got a winner in net, which is saying something. So he knows how to win. You've definitely set up your team with a lot of confidence out of the gate, which is good. I've got
one of the sweetest mustaches on his rookie cards of all time as well.
Yeah, too. Absolutely. So like you're starting out with winning pedigree. I'm starting out with just he knows how to handle 70 shots a game, right? So we're so
going
we're
in different directions with our roster construction right now.
But you know what? I think once we get to the next phase of it with defensemen, you're gonna understand why I went with Don Beaupre as my goalie.
Yeah, well, I had quite a few defenders I could have chosen from here.
Yes.
So to no one's surprise, Dennis Potvin was selected as one of them. I think that was a first ballot Hall of Fame lock right there on who was getting chosen for the Barber polls. But beyond that, there were actually quite a few people that I could have gone with here. So I kind of went with, all right, if we were to actually put these guys on the ice, who would kind of complement what Potvin is bringing to the table there? So I ended up going with more of a flashy kind of puck moving defenseman who could really activate the forwards here in Brian Campbell, who had a stretch where he was probably viewed as a top 5 defenseman in the league by multiple organizations, and was putting up some pretty prolific point totals as well too. Didn't have that longevity of like, oh man, he had a 10-15 year career as far as putting up 60-70 points a season. But when he was at the pinnacle of his game, there were very few blue liners who were activating their forwards and making that unbelievable first pass like he was. So I think pairing those two up on the blue line sets us up for success.
Yeah, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah. Nick Boynton was a honorable mention there. Also had Doug Wilson, who again, another top 10 draft pick in his own right, had a very long storied career as well too in the NHL. But ultimately ended up with going with those two there.
Yeah. I obviously, if you didn't pick Potvin, I was going to come across the computer screen and slap you in the face. So,
the fact listen, if I can go deep into 70s hockey here and pull up Michel Bonnie Larocque, Dennis Potvin, the Oilers or Isles dynasty are definitely getting pulled up there.
Yeah, no, and again, I think the 67s, are renowned for always having a very high-end, top-level puck-moving defenseman. It's like a prerequisite for them.
Yeah.
Right. They have to have one. Two of the guys that you just have on your list absolutely would have been the two guys that I would have picked because, Denny Potvin is a no-brainer. Brian Campbell, for anyone who didn't follow him in junior, I mean, you're not going to get a better junior defenseman than Brian Campbell. His game kind of translated fairly well to the NHL. Had some seasons where he put up some points, but when you look at him in junior, like he was a all-world two-way defenseman. And I love that pick for you and your team. You've got a pretty formidable group there. So again, we're talking about prerequisites for being Ottawa defenseman. I'm literally taking prerequisites for being Sudbury defenseman. Where do you think I'm going with this list, Kyle?
Well, I think you're going grit and grind.
we're going with truculence.
Yeah,
truculence, and you're a no-brainer pick, Denny Potvin. I have a no-brainer pick as well. Actually, from Sudbury in the Coppercliff area, Randy Carlyle is going to be, anchoring my blue line, and obviously very, fantastic player, fantastic coach. Really, understands the game very well. So I think he sets us up very well on the back end, and I'll go through my honorable mentions because there's a few of them who I really like, but honestly, when it came down to it, didn't really make the final cut. But Steve Staios, I mentioned him to you already. He's steady Steve. Played for the Oilers. Now he's running the Senators.
No
have
one can
very,
accuse you of favoritism here. You're just cutting Oilers left, right, and
yeah,
center, right?
it's one of those things. I mean, I try to put on the blank white hat to make sure that I'm not taking either side.
Well,
But yeah,
that's a navy blue hat. I think you're. We got to get some
okay.
spectacles for you. You know?
But another one who kind of flew under the radar, a lot of people wouldn't really recognize the name, but you probably know him very well. Very good Buffalo Sabres defenseman, Jay McKee.
Oh, Jay.
Yeah, he was a very, very good defenseman for Sudbury on a lot of good teams up there. And the guy who was the hardest to cut. This was a very difficult decision for me, but ultimately, don't think he would have meshed very well with Carlisle's playing style. Mark Stahl. Mark Stahl was probably the face of Sudbury hockey for the 3 years that he was playing for the Wolves, and unfortunately,
his brother from some good lineage there.
Yeah,
right? His brothers did all right at hockey too.
Unfortunately, we didn't end up with Eric or Jordan. We ended up with Jared Stahl as another member of the Sudbury Wolves, who unfortunately didn't pan out to be like his three brothers ahead of him. So kind of the Cooper Manning
Jared.
kind of the Cooper Manning of the Stahl family. But
the Denver Broncos. Marge, you just don't understand football.
Yeah. But Mark Stahl, again, fantastic defenseman in his own right, but ultimately had to come down. We talked about him with Kenny. He's one of the favorite players of all time for anyone who's ever been around him. Sean O'Donnell. I mean, you talk about grit and grind, embodying Sudbury hockey. Randy Carlisle and Sean O'Donnell. Good luck getting past those two guys once you're past the red line.
Yeah, well, you're doing all right there. You got a Norris Trophy winning defenseman there, and good old Randy, right?
Yeah,
I think that's everyone always thinks of Randy Carlisle. Okay, he was a coach, Ducks. He had a stint with the Leafs, yada yada.
Hell of a defenseman for Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Everyone kind of glosses over. I think it's because kind of in his coaching career, he's not saying he's let himself go, but doesn't cut a striking physique of an all-world blue liner. So.
Listen, we want to get Randy on the show eventually, so let's mind our P's and Q's. And he is Sudbury royalty, so you watch your mouth.
Yeah, well, we'll contact the Sudbury Tourism Board. We'll book it in there, and we'll smooth things over. So, but yeah, I think that's two great selections right there too. And anytime this thought experiment when you're going through it, not every club can even boast NHL players at every single position there. So the fact that you're getting two who excelled at their positions and had long careers at that position as well too is you're doing all right for yourself there.
Yeah,
good old Donnie Beaupre behind him, ready to clean up whatever gets past them.
100%. But so again, I think we're kind of neck and neck as we come into the home stretch here. So let's kind of see where we went with our forward group, and I'll start with the forward group.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see something here that I'm going to play an Uno reverse card on you if you do. So let's see where you go here.
I mean, I think this is going to be pretty much, what you think I'm going to go with. But honorable mention before I get into my group, the great Mike Foligno, and even his sons Nick and Marcus, all Sudbury Wolf, alumni, all Sudbury Wolf greats. Mike was probably the hardest one to not put on my team, and I think if I were to sub one person out, he'd be my first guy in. But Mike
I literally thought you were just going to go all Folinos and Foligno brother style lineup out there.
If I had a second, if we went into the second, third lines, they would be my third line. I'd throw them out there just to absolutely annihilate your team. But like I said, Mike's another good friend of the family, and really enjoyed watching him and Nick and Marcus kind of come through everything. But Mike Pekka, we talked about him with Ken. Grit and grind type of player. I think anyone who watched hockey in the 90s and early 2000s know Mike Pekka very well. Very small guy, but man, he packed a punch like no one else.
Yeah. He was going to be the one that I was going to play the Uno reverse card on there, because
he's also
those who followed major junior hockey probably remember the ill-fated Sudbury to Ottawa Michael Pekka trade back in the day there.
Yeah, and we can dive into that too. That's kind of a fun story as well. But Anyways, but I got two, very talented, high-scoring forwards from back in the '70s with Dale McCourt and Ron Duguay. Again, went on to have great NHL careers after that. And then everyone's favorite, real house husband, Mike Fisher.
Is that a show?
Yeah, it is now. But Mr. Carey Underwood, Mike Fisher, was one of the best captains in Sudbury Wolf history, and from my experience,
player, but round of applause for batting above your weight class when it came to choosing a significant other. And I think Mike would be the first one to admit that as well.
Yeah, well done, Mike. Again, great guy, great, Ottawa Senator as well. So bringing a lot of Ottawa connections to this list as well. But here's my formidable lineup, who I think you're going to have a hell of a time trying to, defend against. So I've got the great Dale Hunter.
Yeah.
Who else would we lead a charge into this, into the arena other than Dale Hunter? Probably the best Sudbury Wolf of all time. Followed by another, kind of cut from the same cloth type of player, Pat Verbeek. We're going to put him on the...
You better have a hell of a penalty killing unit on this team is all I can say. This group that you're throwing together right now? Holy.
I'm telling you, if you guys make it through the first game, you're lucky. And again, my all-time favorite Sudbury Wolf, and because we need some goal scoring to go along with all the truculence that we've got there. Not to say that Dale and Pat can't score, but we got Glenn Murray. Glenn Murray is just phenomenal player. He was literally the first player that I ever resonated with when I went to Sudbury Wolves games, because he was scoring every single time I went to the arena. So you heard his name over the loudspeaker, I think, 7 times a game with, scored by, assisted by, first star of the game, second star of the game, Glenn Murray. So there's my lineup. I got Pat Verbeek, Dale Hunter, Glenn Murray, with Randy Carlisle, Sean O'Donnell on the blue line, and Donnie Beaupre in net. Very formidable group from the Sudbury unit. Really looking forward to see who you will have, the unfortunate pleasure of putting up against that lineup.
Yeah, the flesh bags that I get to trot out there to just get assaulted by this legion of players that you have. And then the Felinos are coming over the boards for lineup number 2. So again, with the 67s here, there was one slam dunk. Bobby Smith was going to be on there.
Yep.
No huge surprise there. Obviously, a very storied NHL career, had a hell of a junior career as well too. Tons of success with the then Minnesota North Stars, who one of the greatest jerseys of all time right there. And I think the Wild unsuccessfully tried to blend their current what is it, jungle cat bear logo thing with the
a jungle cat bear. It's a wolf, man.
It's not a wolf.
It is a wolf.
Oh, not a shit. All right, we got to get a poll or something going up here in the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, comment what it is right now. But it is not a wolf. That is for
honestly,
sure.
It's the moon with the wilderness in it, and there's a wolf. I'm telling you. Do you think there's jaguars or whatever you just said in Minnesota?
That's a bear. I said it's either like a jungle cat or a bear. That's 100% a bear. Its ears are rounded. It doesn't have the pointy ears. Come on.
Maybe it's
Grow
a
up, Peter
Timberwolf.
Pan, Count Chocula.
maybe it's a Timberwolf. You don't know.
If that's a wolf, I don't know what they're feeding them in Minnesota there.
Well,
in any case, back to our original topic.
The Minnesota Bearwolves.
Minnesota Bearwolves here. Yeah. Maybe it's some sort of a werewolf hybrid or something.
It's a blend.
Anyways,
Bobby Smith.
Bobby Smith is also going to be joined up front by Tyler Toffoli, who, again, Stanley Cup champion, is still playing at a pretty high level in the NHL right now, but was one of only 5 Ottawa 67s to ever score 50 goals in a season. And he happened to do it in back-to-back seasons. So this is a kid. Yeah, this is a kid who has been excelling at every single level that he has been at. Part of one of the most iconic, that 70s line with the Los Angeles Kings as well too, when he kind of broke in and was cutting his teeth out west. And he's doing his absolute best to try and complete the Canadian bingo card of playing for every Canadian franchise out here. So we need to have him. I guess he gets a quasi stamp for playing for the 67s, but he hasn't done his Senators tour of duty yet.
He's kind of like the, Tyler Bertuzzi going to original six teams, right?
Yeah, just slowly checking him off there. He's got a few more stops to make along the way. I felt like being a bit of a shit disturber and just putting Michael Pekka on there just for the unintentional comedy. But seeing who you're trotting out there, I need to have a little bit of truculence myself at this point. And who better to mix it up and get under the opponent's skin than Mr. Gary Roberts, who is currently training the next generation of NHL players right now and was just an absolute physical specimen and still is to this day, even in retirement as well.
Honestly, that was one name. If you didn't put him on the list, I was, again, going to be very upset with you, because knowing the type of player that Gary was and is, I mean, I think you need to have, that type of player on any best of junior team, because not only does he bring goal scoring, skating ability, but all of our favorite players, when we used to go watch, they're always, very loose with dropping the mitts and whatnot, right? And Gary was definitely one of those guys. So who's on your honorable mention list? Because I'm anxious to hear, because I've got one who I'm going to bring up, because, again, if I was making this list, he would have been on my team, but I think it's for a bias purpose.
Yeah, and a ton of very viable options here. I ended up going with those three just because, again, I approached the exercise in terms of who would actually play well together if we were to actually put them out there. But Sean Monahan was another one. Andrew Castles, Sean Donovan, Alan McCauley, Logan Couture was up there as well too.
That was one that I was. No. He's not the one, but that was one I was surprised that that didn't make the cut. But again, not surprised with the list that you did have.
Yeah. So who was your dark horse there that you wanted to add to the list?
You've got to talk about Winnipeg, Ontario's finest, Mr. Julian Talbot, former 67s captain and, leader of the last 67s team to make the Memorial Cup. So, I mean, you got to throw in a good Sudbury boy in there if you want to compete against the Sudbury Wolves, Kyle.
Yeah, my God, you the amount of double agents you have going on in this all-time list here. we have somehow blended both of your home residences of Sudbury and Ottawa seamlessly here with everything that you're setting up.
This is why I thought it would be a very fun episode to have, because, again, there's so much, divisional, if you want to put it that way, interdivisional crossover between Sudbury and Ottawa. But do you remember that last run that the 67s had in the Memorial Cup when they, went on that magical, this is before, after the Brian Campbell year, because that year they won the Memorial Cup. But when, I think it was 2006, I want to say, 2005. And this is when Julian was the captain. Goaltender was another Sudbury boy, Danny Batacchio, who was backed up by none other than Mr. Matt Spezza, Jason's younger brother.
Coached by Don Beaupre.
But you keep Don Beaupre's name out of your mouth.
Listen, as someone who had to watch those early 90s Sens teams there, Don Beaupre is catching a lot of strays in this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who was in net in those early Senators teams would have been catching a lot of strays. But anyways, I remember watching that and thinking, like, these guys are just leaving everything they have on the ice. And you could tell that they were, undermanned. They didn't have as much talent across the board as the other teams that they were playing against. But that was just such a fun team to go watch. I remember going down to, TD Place to watch them all the time. And was it the Civic Center before that? Before it was TD Place? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And like they were just such again, kind of embodied the Northern Ontario style of hockey, where it's like, we might not score 6 goals tonight, but we're going to beat the hell out of you. Yeah. And, the fact that they were able to go on that run to the Memorial Cup was really great to see. And so again, you had your chance to, kind of, sneak in a little Sudbury connection there, either with Mike Pekka or Julian, and you missed. But
I
again,
don't trust them. Don't trust them to not relay, insider information back to your goon squad you're putting together here. Listen, Gary's got a sore knee right now.
And Tyler Toffoli would definitely be looking over his shoulder every time he scored with Dale Hunter lurking around.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I think in a 7-game series, that would be a pretty fun series to watch with the skating ability that you guys have versus the absolute debauchery that the Sudbury team would be bringing to the table with all the physical play and whatnot. So,
well, Ken even was talking about some of those series, right, where you get it back to a rockin' barn in Sudbury, and that's a pretty intimidating building to try and play in, especially if you're going into a do or die game 6 or a game 7 overtime or something like that. So yeah, you guys would definitely be looking to drag us into the deep waters there and try and make it a slugfest for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think maybe what we can even do on a future episode too is, just even throwing aside the 67s and the Wolves here, we could even just do a build your all-time from Sudbury, from Ottawa kind of line up there and see. And if you want, we can go deeper than just line 1. You can slide the Felina boys in there and build that checking line up there if you want as well.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really fun exercise because, like we were saying at the start, once you dive into, who played for this team when, it brings back so many memories for you because, again, like you were mentioning with some of the people that you're like, I just learned that today. There's so many players that have, played junior hockey. There's so many players who have come through, specific cities. Like, and even when we're talking about, the Mike Pekkas of the world, this is a conversation that could be had by 67s and Wolves fans to say, hey, he played for the 67s. He played for the Wolves. And whether you thought the trade was ill-fated or not, it was just one of those things where I remember at the time when he was traded, it was like someone ripped, the heart out of the Sudbury Wolves when he was traded to Ottawa because he was so beloved in the community. So, but anyways, we could talk about the effect and the impact of the Mike Pekka trade on the Sudbury landscape on another episode because I think we're drawing near the end here. But yeah, man, that was great. I mean, talking, down memory lane, going over some of the best players to ever don the respective junior jerseys of our, hometowns. I definitely think we can dive a little deeper, maybe go 4 lines, 3 defense pairing, 2 goalies deep next time. And let's go Sudbury versus Ottawa, just, hometown versus hometown. I love it.